Waiting for the show. Aha! So there's an audience. It's a public show. Waiting for the public show to begin. Or perhaps free. It's a free show. Waiting for the free show. Or compulsory. Waiting for the compulsory show. It takes time. You hear a voice. Someone reciting. That's the show. A recitation. Select passages. Old favourites. A poetry matinee. Or someone improvising. An improvisation. That's the show. You can barely hear. You don't leave. You're afraid to leave. Could be worse elsewhere. Try to remain reasonable. I came too early. For this, you need that. It's beginning. It hasn't begun. He's prelude. He's clearing his throat, alone in the dressing room. He'll appear at any moment. He'll begin at any moment. Or it's the stage manager. Final instructions, last recommendations. The curtain will rise and the show will begin. That's the show. Waiting for the show, to the sound of a murmur. You try to be reasonable. Perhaps it's not a voice at all. Perhaps it's the air, ascending, descending, flowing, eddying, seeking exit, finding none. And the spectators, where are they? In the anxiety of waiting. You forgot. You are waiting alone. That's the show. Waiting alone. Good evening. That's Samuel Beckett. It's a passage from Samuel Beckett's work called The Unnameable. And ideally, if it works properly, you should laugh, and then towards the conclusion, it's no longer so funny. And that's what I want to talk about today, essentially. Samuel Beckett's sense of humour and the way that it works. Now, let us say that that passage, when you think I'm standing here, you hope that I begin to perform very quickly, or else you're going to be very embarrassed. You're going to be very embarrassed for me. We're all going to be embarrassed. So when I finally crack out, he's only joking, thank God. This release of unconscious pressure is something that Sigmund Freud identified as one of the mechanisms of humour. And in order to talk about Samuel Beckett, I have to talk about three things today. I'm going to have to talk about humour, comedy, and jokes in reverse order. So let me get rid of jokes, first of all. Sigmund Freud said in Jokes and the Relation Beyond the Service of Aggression. He means here that a conscious power relation exists in a joke. For example, at the conscious level, you have a teller, you have a listener, and you have the butt of a joke, if I could make it a spatial metaphor. Yes? The teller and the listener agree to enter into a collusion and laugh at the expense of the butt of the joke. Essentially, Freud is suggesting that jokes are a form of power relation that involve aggression. The implication is that jokes are maybe not so healthy because they rely on subjectivism. However, it is often the case that aggression is the last resort of the oppressed, and that in the symbolic world of jokes, a joke can often trump an adversary who in reality is more powerful. Now, we all know from the tradition of jokes that Irishmen are basically stupid. Particularly if you listen to English jokes about Irishmen. We have the whole tradition of Punch magazine. And apparently, in one theory of humour, what happens is that Irish people then laugh at people from Kerry. which is a county in Ireland. And people in Kerry laugh at people from Cahersiveen. Did you hear the joke about the man from Cahersiveen? And people from Cahersiveen presumably laugh at the Murphys who live on number 10 on the main street. And the Murphys in number 10 on the main street, well, they tell jokes about English people. Would you like to hear one? An Englishman and an Irishman are living next door to each other in London. Irishman keeps chickens as he would. Infuriates the Englishman. One day, one of the chickens jumps over the fence and lays an egg in the Englishman's garden. Englishman comes thundering out and says, "My egg." Irishman says, "My egg, my chicken." Englishman says, "My garden." And they start fighting furiously. The Irishman says, "Stop." He says, "We have a way in my country of solving these disputes." Englishman says, "What?" Irishman says, "We both take turns to kick each other in the testicles, and the one who gets up the fastest, wins." Englishman says, with typical English decorum, "After you." Irishman says, "No, after you." Englishman says, "No, I insist, after you." So the Irishman takes a run from somewhere in the vicinity of the north entrance to Cornell, all the way up to this entrance, and plants among the testicles of the Englishman a more vicious kick than has ever been recorded. The Englishman falls to the ground, lies twitching for 10 minutes, suddenly drags himself to his feet, face purple, and says, "My turn." Irish guy says, "Well, keep the egg." This joke confirms that there is a power relation at work in the structure. It also indicates that sometimes the dispossessed have a way of getting back, which is through laughter. You laugh at the punchline, and so at English people. There is an object to the laughter. Ultimately, a joke is a form of humour that requires ratification by others, and this paradigm is not specific to either the comic or to the sense of humour. In other words, it is really only in the joke that you require the presence of another. Note by the fact that you can never tell yourself a joke twice, it's not funny the second time, if you're alone. Now, it is important to remember, because I will not speak of jokes again, but it is important to remember that comedy and humour are equally tools of empowerment and subversion, as they were for Samuel Beckett. If he is not engaged in telling jokes, he is very much preoccupied with how humour can be employed to subvert, challenge, undermine people and our institutions, and values that make other people poor, dispossessed, or bereft. In other words, Beckett's comedy has a certain political dimension, what we might call the body politic, something that is in fact inherent in the history of comedy. I'll provide for you a quick summary. The comic mask, komos from the ancient Greek, it means to revel, to celebrate. The origins of theatre are in Athens, in spring festivals, where privilege was paid to the twin gods of Apollo, the god of order, and Dionysus, the god of chaos, let us say. Out of the celebration of too much chaos came the city elders' decision to stage theatre, and particularly tragedy, which was designed to pay homage to Apollo, the god of order. Aristotle was the first one to write about tragedy, and made a distinction between tragedy and comedy, wherein tragedy was more important than comedy because it involved catharsis, because it was, in the simplest of terms, grand, because it ennobled man and brought something to his existence. On the other hand, Aristotle felt that comedy was basically about fertility, it was about eros, it was about the body. Because it was about the body, it was not as significant as tragedy, which was about man's mind, perhaps his capacity for delusion. Aristophanes wrote one of the first comedies in Lysistrata, the play. However, comedy did not really take on a full head of steam until the Romans adopted it. And the Romans adopted comedy and adapted comedy in the way they adapted everything. They made it political because they recognized its ideological possibility.